I'm Lynn Abrahams. I work at Iziko as a curator, and that's why the interview is here. I am also a former student activist, continued activist, and particularly an activist. Well, I've got different streams of activism, GBV, but I think my main passion is heritage. So I also identify as a heritage activist. I grew up, I was raised by a single mother, and I have two siblings, so I'm the middle child. And growing up, we lived with my grandparents, especially after my father got separated. And my mother's history, my mother comes from as a younger woman, until she got married, she was well off her family. But then things changed after she got divorced and independence, and we ended up in Bellville South. So that's actually where I grew up. And I think to a large extent, it's also where I got shaped in so many ways. So growing up in Bellville South, as a youngster, not understanding things. I mean, as so-called colored people, we were very sheltered from the truth, especially what was happening around us. And I went to Casselsvlei High School in 1984, I think. I started my high school career at Casselsvlei. And a large part of my activism was actually birthed, if you can say that, at Casselsvlei. Because also as a child, with a single parent, my mother wasn't educated. So she left school at standard 8. At that time, it was still like JSC or something like that, but it was equal to what matric would have been. But there was no post. She got pregnant, she got married, and then she had 3 children. So growing up, we had very hard times, tough times. I remember we had a house, a 3-roomed house, and our toilet was way at the back. And I think as I got older, it became very advantageous when I wanted to run away to have a toilet at the back. But it was just basically a shell with no water, running water, no bathroom, no kitchen, no ceiling. It was just a shell. That's the house where I grew up in. And before I became politically conscious, I think, I just couldn't understand why other people had, and especially within my family, and why we were in this position, why we didn't have, why is it that we had to ask people for food, or, so it's things like that I just didn't understand. And I mean, a lot of questioning, why do you have to eat pap every night, or, or not having something to eat. So these were the things I questioned. And then at high school, I think from 84, going into 85, there were all these awareness campaigns. So like you had June 16, so it was called, I think it was it called Soweto Today or something like that at that time. So then we would gather in the courtyard and we would be conscientized around these days. And that is how I realized that, look, hang on, I'm better off. Even within all the things that I didn't have, I was much better off than other people. I mean, you come from a history, or where we were taught history of African people, that they were uncultured and all of these things. So then now you begin to realize that there are actually people who has it far worse off than you have. And through that kind of awareness campaigns, I became politically conscious, and I began to understand that my life is far better off than so many other people in our country. But also I began to understand that what is happening in this country, apartheid in itself, these were things that was wrong, that people were separated on the basis of skin color. So that is how my political conscientization started off. I remember when I got involved, I think from the standard 6, I went to standard 6, 84, 85, I became involved. I think I was 14, 15 years old at that time. And when I became involved, my family just didn't like that at all. I was the only female in my entire family that got involved. My mother said to me, I think it was in 86 when I then was elected onto the school's SRC. So it's like, what do the learners have today? They've got this, some other body, we called it SR Student Representative Councils. And it was not like the role of what they have today. It was much bigger than what was in. But I mean, my mother said to me that she's going to go to the principal, they must remove me. And I mean, at that age, I could say to her, there were two things in life that you cannot decide for me. And the one is politics, the way I see things, and the other one is religion. So my father's mother was a flower seller in Cape Town, here in Adley Street. And I mean, I was just like scolded in front of everybody. I'm a disgrace to the family. And that is how, because colored people had this thing of, you know, once you became involved, you were immediately seen as a troublemaker, you know, and that is how it began. And obviously later on, as you moved into the 80s, kind of like things changed because there was a lot of activism and people were actually brought together and eyes were opened because of the bread and butter issues, the daily struggles that people experience. And that is how more people then became to understand what it was like, you know, and the differences. And there's a whole lot of things in history that you can go back to, you know. I mean, just the mere fact that if you look at even indigenous communities today, the whole narrative of being extinct, but yet people lived. I mean, we are sitting here as live as we are, you know, this whole narrative of, but that was also a narrative of extinction, was also a narrative to claim their own indigeneity in a country that was not theirs. And that is why, yes, apartheid was legislated in 1948, but I think that there's a lot that happened prior to that. And I mean, you can go back since in fact, even maybe before 1652, you know, and so claiming land and separating communities and then further. And even when Nguni groups then came, you know, I mean, there was no Eastern Cape. Remember, there was only the Cape Colony, and the Cape Colony stretched to as far as the Eastern Cape. I think it was only after 94 that you had the separation of provinces, and that, but it was one. And I mean, when the Khoi groups refused to be even to be recruited as a workforce, as a labor force, as opposed to their way of life, they kind of like went towards the Eastern Cape side, and they got refuge there, and people mixed and intermingled and got married. So this entire system, you can even go back to the days of slavery, right here at the slave lodge. You know, if you go into the history of the slave lodge already, you'll find that there were, for example, your mulatto slaves, which was your lighter in complexion, and to some extent maybe even born between, you know, but whether there was rape at that time, and whether women used their bodies as a form of agency, as survival, is also something, because having a child by somebody might have meant my freedom, you know, but just the mere fact that Angolan slaves were treated differently because they were darker in complexion, you know, they had different rations or whatever, maybe the clothing were different, what they ate were different, how many times, so it's something that came long ago. It was just legislated in 1948, and when it was legislated, it turned and made everyone's lives a complete hell. It was so inhumane You know, I mean, yes, the system of slavery was inhumane as well, and this was an extension, and maybe even you can say turning us all into slaves through apartheid legislation, because we were controlled, where you could sit, where you could dance, where you could eat, where you could do this. It was just we didn't have the shackles. You know, the visible shackles, the chains that the enslaved people were tied up with, but the legislation became those shackles, you know, and that is just how my interpretation of it. Even at university, I mean, although I was not actively involved in SASCO in itself, I mean, I participated in all those activities, and I remember there was, especially in that period, there was this thing of whether we compromise or not. But prior to that, there was the call for liberation before education, and then it changed to education for liberation. But then there was also this thing of Panzi compromise. We felt that we didn't want to compromise, especially after Chris Hani was also killed. I mean, there was, at that stage, we felt, let me not say we, let me speak for myself, but I think at that stage, you know, we were prepared to go in fully. And if it means that we had to die, we were prepared to do that. Because we could feel, you could feel that the apartheid government, you could feel that they were running out of ideas. I mean, the purple dye was one of the ways of running out of ideas, but we could also feel that freedom was coming now. You know, you could feel it. But also we felt that there was distrust. We don't trust the government, because when we looked at what happened in Boybeton and Ciskei and how they then funded, I mean, whilst negotiations was taking place, so they funded these things, you know, so there was a lot of not trying to calm the mood, but I mean, we were always torn between whether we compromise because of the negotiations, or do we just go full out, head on, you know? And obviously it changed, it turned into the compromise that we did. In hindsight, if you ask me whether the compromise was good, I would say maybe yes, because I mean, so much blood has already flown, so many lives that was lost. You know, but almost 30 years later, the fact that in '94 we were only given political power, and the second phase of our revolution had always been the economic emancipation of our people. And if you look 30 years from now, from then, you know, yes, a lot of has been done, but a lot of things like the land and things like that has not been addressed. And so yeah, I think that maybe we could have negotiated better clauses. I don't know, you know. I think for a message to young people, they must find their voice, because I think we cannot be complacent. We cannot become a nation of moaning, you know, with nobody taking it forward. This is ultimately your future. And if then you see that your future is threatened, you're not going to sit back. You're going to find your voice, you're going to establish yourself as an authority, and you're going to speak up. And that is why we say, a luta continua, the struggle continues. So allow yourself to find your voice and take forward and take over and really get into what does it mean for the struggle to continue. It doesn't matter whether it is just a struggle at school, whether you are a young woman who don't have a sanitary pad. That's a struggle in itself. It means we need to fight, and we need to lobby government to provide us with sanitary towels. If it is that you don't have food, then we need to understand why is it, what are the problems, you know. So organize, mobilize yourself as young people and find your voice and speak out. Make your poster and use your social media. Young people are on TikToks and all of that, but use it and find your voice and just make a difference. This country, freedom was not built because people sat back. Freedom came because of the blood, sweat, and tears of many, many people. And unfortunately, it is in your hands today. It is just in your hands where we take this country. So our future is in your hands, and you need to find that voice and make our future work.